The dwarf tied to a tree lifted her hand weakly towards Abena, tears dropping from her eyes. "Please help me. They will kill me and my baby," the dwarf pleaded in a soft, shaking voice. Abena stepped back in fear. Her body was shaking and she wanted to run away, but the dwarf's sad eyes were calling her. Abena was a poor woman in the village. She lived in a small mud house with a leaking roof. She did not have much money and she was always looking for ways to feed herself and her 2 children. Her husband died many years ago, and since then she had been alone in her struggles. One early morning before sunrise, Abena tied her basket and went to fetch firewood from the forest near the village. The birds were just starting to sing and the cold breeze touched her skin as she walked on the narrow footpath. Abena liked to go to the forest very early because she would pick snails and needed to return home early to prepare some breakfast for her children before they woke up. When she got to the forest, she filled her basket with firewood and snails, then carefully lifted it onto her head. The basket was heavy, but Abena was used to carrying heavy loads on her head. She started walking back home, but she decided to take the quiet road because it was shorter and she wanted to reach home before the sun rose fully. As she was walking through the quiet bush path, she saw 3 hunters standing under a mango tree. They were talking and laughing, holding their guns and wearing their hunting bags. Abena greeted them politely. "Good morning, hunters." The hunters answered her, but they did not look at her face and their voices were cold. They were too busy talking to each other and laughing. Abena continued walking slowly, and as she moved, she heard one of the hunters saying, "Ah, we are rich now. I still can't believe we caught the pregnant dwarf near the forest and we will get double money for this one." Another hunter laughed and said, "Yes, they say if a dwarf is pregnant, the power inside her and the baby will give us a lot of money. We will sell her to Alhaji in the city." Abena's heart started beating fast. She did not understand what they were talking about. Pregnant dwarf? Double money? Sell to Alhaji? She thought as she carried the heavy basket on her head. She walked away quickly, but her mind was troubled. She kept wondering, is it true that there is a dwarf near our forest? Is it true that she is pregnant? Are they really going to sell her? As she moved closer to her small pathway that led home, she decided to pass through the small bush behind the big trees so she could pick few mushrooms. But as she walked, she heard a soft crying sound coming from behind a big bamboo tree. Abena stopped. She placed her basket gently on the ground and listened carefully. "Help! Help me!" she heard a weak voice. Abena was afraid. Her legs were shaking and her heart was beating fast. She looked around to see if someone was there, but she could not see anyone. Then she slowly walked closer to the bamboo tree, and what she saw shocked her. There, tied to the tree with a strong rope, was a beautiful tiny woman with long silver hair and shining skin. Her eyes were filled with tears and she looked very weak and tired. Her stomach was very big and it was clear that she was pregnant. Abena looked down and saw something that made her freeze. Instead of normal human legs, the woman had a long foot turned backward and it was tied with rope together with her arm, making her unable to move. Abena opened her mouth, but no words came out. She was staring at a pregnant dwarf in the bush near the village forest. The dwarf lifted her hand weakly towards Abena, tears dropping from her eyes. "Please help me. They will kill me and my baby," the dwarf pleaded in a soft, shaking voice. Abena stepped back in fear. Her body was shaking and she wanted to run away, but the dwarf's sad eyes were calling her. She had never seen a dwarf before, and she had heard stories in the village about dwarves who take people's souls and about how dangerous they were. But the dwarf in front of her did not look dangerous. She looked helpless and scared, like a woman who needed help. Abena looked around quickly and saw no one. She took a step closer to the dwarf, her heart beating fast. "Please help me. They will come back to take me away. I don't want to die," the dwarf said again, her hand still stretched towards Abena. Abena bent down slowly and whispered, "Are you really a dwarf?" The dwarf nodded, tears falling from her eyes. "Yes, and I am pregnant. They caught me when I came to the forest at midnight. They tied me here to come back later. Please help me." Abena's eyes were full of pity. She saw that the dwarf was shivering and there were bruises on her arms where the rope was tied. Suddenly, Abena heard voices of men talking nearby. She quickly turned around and saw shadows moving near the bushes. "They are coming," the dwarf whispered, fear in her eyes. Abena's mind was confused. She did not know what to do. Should she help the dwarf escape? Should she leave her there and run away? The voices became clearer, and Abena could hear the hunters laughing and saying, "We will take her before people start coming out." Abena's breathing became heavy. She knew that if they come now, they would see her standing near the dwarf and they might harm her too. She looked at the dwarf, who was still begging her with tears and fear in her eyes. Abena did not know where she got the courage, but she stepped closer to the rope tied around the dwarf's legs. The dwarf flinched in pain, but she looked at Abena with hope. "Hiv, Hiv, please, please, please," the dwarf kept saying weakly. Abena felt sweat on her forehead, her heart beating like a drum, her hands moving fast to untie the rope. The voices of the hunters were now very close. "Let's see if we can take her," one of them said. Abena's eyes widened in fear. The basket of firewood and snails she had left on the ground was still there, and it would be easy for the hunters to know someone was around. Abena looked at the dwarf, and the dwarf looked back at her. At that moment, Abena knew that her life would change forever because of what she was about to do. But just before she could untie the last knot, the footsteps of the hunters stopped very close to them, and Abena quickly hid herself. Abena's heart was beating like a drum. Her hands were shaking and sweat was running down her face, even though the early morning was still cold. The dwarf was breathing heavily, tears rolling down her cheeks as she looked at Abena with fear and pain in her eyes. She knew that the hunters would soon find her and she would be taken away. Abena closed her eyes for a moment and whispered inside her heart, "God, please help us. Don't let them find us here." Just as the hunters were about to turn to the back of the bamboo tree, one of the hunters, who was walking behind the others, suddenly screamed loudly, "An antelope! An antelope!" The hunters stopped immediately and turned around quickly. "Where is it? Where is it?" they shouted. "There, there, running towards the other side," the hunter said, pointing with his gun into the bushes. The hunters forgot about the dwarf for a moment and started running towards the direction of the antelope, lifting their guns in the air, ready to shoot. Their boots made loud sounds on the dry leaves as they rushed towards the direction of the antelope, shouting and calling each other. Abena's eyes widened in surprise. She saw this as her only chance. She came out quickly from her hiding place and ran back to the dwarf. "Please, let's go now before they come back," Abena whispered to the dwarf, her hands moving fast to untie the rope. The rope was rough and strong and it hurt her fingers, but she did not stop. The dwarf was whimpering in pain, but she looked at Abena with hope in her eyes. Thank you," the dwarf whispered weakly. Abena finally untied the last knot, and the rope fell to the ground. The dwarf's long leg turned normal, and she leaned on the tree, too weak to stand properly. Abena looked around quickly. She could still hear the hunters' voices, but they were now closer to the forest, shouting and calling each other as they searched for the antelope. She knew she had to leave immediately, or they would return and find the dwarf missing. The dwarf tried to stand, but fell back. Her body hurt. "Please help me," she whispered. Abena bent down, wrapped her arms around the dwarf's waist, and tried to lift her. The dwarf was heavy, and Abena was not strong enough, but she tried her best. She placed the dwarf's arm over her shoulder, and the dwarf leaned heavily on Abena, her baby bump making it hard for her to move easily. Abena took a step forward, then another, her legs shaking under the weight. They moved slowly, step by step, trying to avoid the dry leaves that made noise under their feet. The dwarf was wincing in pain, breathing heavily and holding her stomach. Ah, the dwarf groaned softly. Abena looked at her with pity. She did not know how long they would take to reach her hut, but she could not leave the dwarf behind. Every 5 minutes, Abena had to stop and rest. She would bend down, allowing the dwarf to sit on the ground for a moment while she wiped the sweat from her face. Her basket of firewood was still there, but she could not carry it now. She left it behind, focusing on getting the dwarf to safety. The morning sun was beginning to rise, and the birds were singing louder now. Abena's clothes was soaked with sweat, and her back was aching, but she kept moving. The dwarf was crying softly, her face pale, and her hand holding her big belly. "Please don't leave me. I don't want to die," she kept whispering. "I will not leave you," Abena said, even though her body was tired and her legs were shaking. They passed through the small, narrow bush paths, avoiding places where people would see them. Abena was afraid that if the villagers saw the dwarf, they might call the hunters or bring trouble to her. They stopped to rest again under a mango tree, and Abena checked the dwarf's face. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. The dwarf nodded weakly, but tears rolled down her cheeks. After some time, Abena gathered her strength and lifted the dwarf again. They continued moving, resting and moving, until finally they reached Abena's small mud hut at the edge of the village. Abena pushed the wooden door open carefully and looked inside. Her 2 children were still deeply asleep on the mat. She was happy they were still sleeping, so they would not see the dwarf yet. Abena helped the dwarf inside and laid her gently on the floor, which was covered with a small old mat. The dwarf groaned in pain, her hands on her belly, her legs lying weakly on the mat. Abena looked at her with concern. She saw that the dwarf's body was swollen in some places and there were red marks where the rope had tied her. "I will bring hot water," Abena said softly. She quickly went outside, took some water, and placed it on the small fire in her kitchen. When the water became warm, she poured some into a small bowl and brought it inside. She dipped a clean cloth into the hot water, squeezed it, and gently placed it on the dwarf's swollen arms and shoulders. The dwarf winced in pain, but after a while, she let out a soft sigh of relief. Abena continued to massage the dwarf's body with the hot water, wiping away the dirt and sweat and pressing gently on her back. "Thank you, thank you," the dwarf kept whispering, tears rolling down her cheeks. Abena felt pity in her heart, and she also felt afraid. She did not know what would happen next, and she did not know why the dwarf was out in the bush, pregnant and caught by hunters. The room was quiet except for the soft groans of the dwarf and the small crackling of the fire outside. Abena looked at the dwarf's big belly and wondered, what kind of baby is inside her? Will it be a dwarf or a human? She did not know, but she knew she could not let the dwarf die. The dwarf opened her eyes weakly and looked at Abena. "My name is Adoma," she said softly. Abena was surprised. "Adoma? That is a beautiful name. My name is Abena." Adoma smiled weakly, but her eyes were still filled with tears. "Thank you, Abena. I will never forget this," she whispered. Abena nodded, holding Adoma's hand gently. Suddenly, they heard the sound of footsteps outside the hut, and Abena's eyes widened in fear. Thank you for staying with me till the end. Every story we share carries a lesson, a spark of hope, strength, or warning. If this story touched you, inspired you, or made you think, show some love, like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.